When it comes to Khalsa Aid, there's obviously like a bit of a negative connotation associated with charities being inefficient with their money. So how do you guys shed that image to just be like, we're just providing and helping people literally on the front lines as much as possible? I know social media can amplify that, but that can still be somewhat monitored and filtered. How do charities go about that, which is making things seem pretty authentic, to be honest?
That's a, but you know what? It's a very broad question, a very important question, and like you said, it's a broader issue in the sector. I know with Khalsa Aid, I can speak there, and I can mention some bits about the sector within it, but within Khalsa Aid, I think the focus has always been on showcasing the work. The charity as a international humanitarian aid charity, it's a very, very young charity.
Yeah.
Very, very small charity. And when you start to compare to the larger humanitarian aid organizations, your Red Crosses.
Red Cross, that's the first one we all thought of, yeah.
If you even look at slightly smaller, so you look at within the Islamic community, Islamic Relief, for example, Khalsa Aid is much, much smaller in financially and in terms of the team of people and resources. But I think what really makes Khalsa Aid stand out is really around the human element and the compassion element. And Buddy, you mentioned this earlier, it's all around working with people, right? And how do you deliver aid with compassion, but then how do you also engage with the communities that you're serving? Because one of the broader issues within the sector is this sort of savior complex. We know better, this is what you're going to get, this is the support you're going to get. And I can rattle off so many stories where Khalsa Aid has really had to get involved and address that. But getting back to your point, so by focusing on the people and just really showcasing the work, so you mentioned social media there, that's just basically highlighting the work. This is going to be on the ground, this is what we're doing. And it just shows for a lot of people, seeing that is enough, because that shows the impact. We're saying, well, we said we're going to respond to this disaster within 24 hours or within X period of time. We're here. This is what we're doing, and we're keeping people updated on that journey. So that's one way. Another way to really provide transparency, and this is the key piece, is around how do you provide transparency to show that you are being efficient, or you're working towards being more efficient, right? Because it's not going to happen over.
It's never going to have 100% efficiency either. Like, there's always going to be costs associated with it. Like, that's just reality.
Yeah, so that's where reporting comes in. And so, for example, one aspect I'll always tell people to look into is, if you're looking to support a charity, look at the annual accounts.
Yeah.
Look at the work they're doing. Look at their governance. Who's on their board. What are they working on at the moment in terms of organisation? What's the impact in terms of pounds spent versus donations received potentially, or what's the impact to the communities they serve? All those metrics have got their pros and cons. But looking at that, so for example, with Khalsa Aid, one of the areas a focus for myself was around transforming some of their finance activities and reporting. So if you look at Khalsa Aid's most recent annual report, it's got a bit more detail. We're trying to improve the level of transparency in terms of providing more KPIs and key performance indicators. In terms of what are we doing to the, how much aid have we provided? What's the impact to the community? How many people are we kind of touching through our work around the world? And providing a bit more detail in terms of the work that we're actually doing on the ground. So there's a bit more transparency there. And in terms of the internal operations, what work are we doing and what's the journey look like? So all of a sudden, you're engaging with the community in a much better way. And that's more at a governance level. And I think our community and the public in general needs to look into that in terms of charities to really get under.
So looking at the data. Okay. And I guess the question I would have there is, so when for that example, this report, you produce more KPIs. If we look at, say, 3-4 charities, is this what you're producing? Is it standard across? Could I compare A charity versus B charity? Is it standardized in the way you guys report, or is it all different? Like, you could choose your own KPIs per charity?
Really good question, Paddy. I think in the short answer is no, because each charity is working on different areas, different focus areas. There are frameworks to align the areas of work so that you could use the UN Sustainable Development Goals, for example. There's sort of 17 goals and sort of key areas of focus for the society as a whole around the globe. And then there's the other broader issue around impact reporting, which how do you standardize charities that are operating in different sectors, providing different services? It's a very, very hard thing to do. So in an answer to your question, Paddy, not generally no, but there's certain metrics you might look at that are just financial metrics. You could say, for every pound donated to this charity, how much is being spent on aid versus admin costs? That's a very, very basic one. That doesn't always tell you the full picture because, some charities might not be spending everything, but the quality of their work is really, really good, right? So that's something to think about. But sorry, in answer to your question, not necessarily. It requires more work on the donor's end. Really.
And do you find the average person is doing this work in terms of looking at charity, looking at the back end, looking at the finances? So it's great, obviously, you increase it. Oh, do they understand what they're looking at? I guess that's the other thing as well.
I think it's difficult. Like, average person stuff is going to just fluctuate massively, isn't it? Like, obviously for us guys, my instinct is I'm going to donate to charity, a general charity. It will be Khalsa Aid because it's close to us as Sikhs, so it means a lot. But say if it's a specific charity like cancer research, you're always going to go to cancer research because it's the one. So I guess there is some level to look into it deeper.
Yeah, true, but I guess, to be honest, from the front end, if it looks like it's doing good work, I wouldn't necessarily go and investigate and look at like Companies House and look at all these things because I wouldn't know what I'm looking for. Like I wouldn't be able to read these statements and things. And I guess you're right. If you feel like from the outside that they're doing good work, I guess you'd just donate that. But I guess it's important.
Paji, I think it's a very valid question. I think it's like Indy mentioned, it's a range, it's a spectrum. But the piece that's really important is if you wanted to look into an organisation, the information should be there.
It should be available and easily accessible. You shouldn't have to go hunting for it. It should just be there.
It should be there, and also people work or donate to charities from a variety of different. Some people just want to say, well, for example, cancer research. During a period of hardship for myself, my family, or someone who's been affected by cancer, cancer research really helped, and I want to support them. They may not be looking at any other fact, and that's really important to them. So everyone's got different drivers and motivation, right?
Yeah, of course, because that's what's going to draw you in, isn't it? Is there a normal like baseline percentage of efficiency that people would normally look at? So you get the pound analogy of saying every pound spent, X amount goes to something. Is there like a level that's consistent amongst the whole sector that people tend to aim for, like 30%, 40%, or anything of that kind of nature?
There isn't necessarily an agreed consensus, but I mean, myself as an accountant, I may look at it and say, well, you'd expect at least 75-80% going on aid and 20% on sort of administration costs. Some charities look at and say, if you're a general public donor, we spend 100% of your donations on aid. What that means is they have other alternative arrangements. For example, a corporate funder may say, we're funding all your admin or back end costs. And think about it that way. Ultimately, I think there's a piece around efficiency and transparency and organizations improving it, but I think there's a piece around the donors just recognizing that, because if you think about it, and one perspective I share from having worked in the sector is sometimes if you're just looking at just improving the your pound spent metric, looking at that one, it can be sometimes a futile effort, because in the charities it's thinking about, okay, how do I cut costs everywhere else? And they're not necessarily thinking about the sustainability of their organization and the work that they're
doing. How they're doing it. That's a really, really good point.
And so the infrastructure helps to deliver that. So I would always argue that's a core part of it. And nowadays, I know for myself, because I think I understand that more, I would rather, if charities are looking for funding, or they'll say, well, would someone fund this, the operational aspect or the infrastructure aspect? I would generally veer and say, let me support that, because I recognize actually most people will probably say, oh no, I want to donate to the frontline causes or the actual
what they
work
see.
you're doing.
Yeah. And you're right. It's a lot. It's not to take away from, obviously, when you're there and you're with a person who needs help and you give them a bottle of barley, that's the end point of delivery. But end to end, it's a whole process, man.
And the environment in which Khalsa Aid operates in the humanitarian sector, right? You're in disaster zones, you're in war zones, you're in civil conflict zones. They're tough places. It's not like I'm going to go to the local cash and carry warehouse and buy these supplies.
Just buy
it all from East End. Let's go, right?
It's not like that at all, and it's much more difficult to work in those environments. And then if you're looking at development programs, which it's not the, you've been impacted by a disaster, we need to provide you shelter, water, sanitation, or food. It might just be, we're here to support you on a development program because your economic prospects need to be improved, and so we're going to help you with skills and training. That's a very, very different type of
it's a big beast, that is.
That's
You're
huge.
willing to, I can only presume you have to embed yourself within the, because this thing you talked about earlier about this hero complex, savior complex, I guess it's easy, it'd be easy, and I get this sometimes, I get frustrated with the junior doctors where it's like, I could do everything for you, I can provide, like, let's say it's called that aid,
Yeah.
but then you're not gonna learn. But if I spent 4 months now in a different department, embedding myself so that when I leave and move on, actually these guys have some skills now, and they can do the things that I've taught them how to do.
It's a hard distinction to do. It takes maturity
because
to
you
get to that.
just want to do it like it's frustrating or what you're doing. Like, come on,
Yeah.
I'll do it instead. Fix the printer. See, have to teach them how to fix printers as well. But yeah, like with Khalsa Aid, I can only imagine that when they're in that, what you specifically said there, where it's not necessarily like your obvious kind of disaster, it will take time and effort, and that was a slow burner. But I guess if you get it right, and when you get it right, these generations are impacted. Like that's massive, massive market. But
Indy, I asked you that because I knew that you're an accountant, so therefore numbers, I'm like, give me a number, man. You definitely know the ins and outs of this. You've done the accounts, you know exactly how it's meant to look.
I'm not your orthodox,
usual kind
orthodox accountant.